Hello, everyone. Today we will discuss courts and laws and judicial system. So again, what is judiciary? What are different types of laws? What is due process? And a few things about judicial review. And these are learning outcomes for our discussion for our next few minutes. The main goal of the judiciary is to implement laws, and they have to be impartial, and judiciary usually serves as a mechanism for addressing differences between entities or individuals. Very important principles of rule of law which distinguish democracies from dictatorships. There is no one above the law. If someone commits a crime, that someone gets prosecuted. Just laws in democratic societies, laws for the most part are common sense. They actually make sense to have such laws. Open government, on all stages of passing laws, law enforcement, all those stages are accessible to the public. Currently, for example, proceedings in Congress, many of them are televised, so there are transcripts of those proceedings. In terms of enforcement, many courts allow journalists in courtrooms. In terms of Supreme Court, we can hear audios from Supreme Court. So all the stages in this process are transparent in democratic societies. An important thing is justice is done in timely manner by independent and neutral decision makers. This is more of an ideal. Sadly, even in this country, we can see a bunch of decision makers in court system which are clearly partisan. For example, this decision to Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade, which made abortion rights on like state-by-state basis. They have been done by partisan judges, which have been appointed by Donald Trump when he was president. Important thing about judicial system, if we are talking about separation of power system like in the United States, judicial system can serve as a check on legislative body of government and executive body of government. In dictatorships, judiciary is mostly used to keep people in control. For example, after Putin invaded Ukraine in 2020, he was able to pass several laws which prohibit expression of disapproval of his invasion of Ukraine. And from 2022 to 24, almost 20,000 people have been arrested for expressing their disagreement over Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So in dictatorships, judiciary is mostly to impose dictators' will on population. Important thing, judiciary in democratic societies, they have limited power in terms of when they make decisions, when judges make decisions, they rely on laws which have already been passed, and so they're kind of limited. And also, courts, all courts have jurisdictions. and the set of cases they are allowed to hear. There are a bunch of ways in which judges are selected, usually on like highest courts. It's appointment for life. And there is a discussion about like, is it actually reasonable? For example, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a liberal judge, very prominent when Obama was president, and he had majority in the Senate for the first 2 years of his presidency. He tried to very delicately talk to Ginsburg, maybe it's time for you to resign. She refused, and what happened when Trump became president and he had Republican control of the Senate, he was able to, and there have been like a couple of retirements. Trump was able to appoint 3 very conservative judges. So, in my personal view, appointment for life is not a perfect way to deal with judges' appointments. Better way, appointments for like specific number of years. In some cases, in states in the United States, and there's an election, as judges are elected by population, and then there are like hybrid systems. And these are learning outcomes for discussion for the next couple of minutes. Basic principles. If someone files, let's say, civil suit, those people must have some kind of standing, which means they must have been harmed by some effect of existing laws. And also in democratic societies, it looks very basic, but courts use evidence to make decisions. In countries like Russia, people who, let's say, defend dissidents, political opponents of Putin, in many cases, their attorneys, they're not even allowed to introduce evidence into court hearings, or if it is introduced, that evidence just gets ignored. It's not possible in this country. And for example, another example why evidence is important. When Trump was defeated by Biden in 2020 election, he made claims that election have been stolen, but when his lawyers tried to file lawsuits in courts, they have been dismissed because they have not been able to present any evidence. So this evidence thing in courts is actually important. And it's about democratic societies. Very important case which allowed minorities to be in schools, and now there is no racial segregation in American schools. There are schools where there are like more whites than minorities or more minorities than whites, but no segregation thanks to this Supreme Court decision. And these are learning outcome of our discussion for next few minutes. Okay, different law systems around the world, and let's chat about them one by one. As you can see, common law is mostly like a relic of British Empire, and mostly countries which have been British colonies, they have these common laws like US, Canada, Australia, India. Those countries, they have common law. And then civil law, even Russia has civil law. So in majority of countries, they have civil laws, Islamic law in a few Islamic countries, customary law, and mixed system law. Important distinction about common law. In common law, precedent is very important, and many decisions are guided by decisions on similar cases by previous judges. But it doesn't mean that judges like follow those like follow the precedent. Again, for example, Roe versus Wade decision established abortion rights as a federal policy. And then in Dobbs decision, different judges, but still in Supreme Court, they decided to ignore precedent and said abortion is now a matter of state rights. Every state has its right to come up with whatever policy they like. Civil law systems in Europe, South America, countries have codes, let's say criminal code, civil code, tax code, and judges try to apply the laws to cases. Precedents don't matter in those systems. Again, religious systems in countries like Iran and some others, where religion is applied to resolving disputes. And in many cases, it involves oppressing women. Customary systems, not very common anymore. And these are learning outcomes for discussion for next few minutes. Important thing about criminal law, it usually involves a severe offense. Only government can bring about a criminal case, in contrast to civil case where, let's say, a landlord can file a lawsuit against a tenant who's like damaged property or whatever. There are a bunch of reasons for punishments. They're kind of obvious. And one of the aspects which mostly absent in American system is rehabilitation. And it is very much present in Scandinavian systems. And as a result, if you look up rates of recidivism, whether or not people who have been incarcerated, whether or not they go back to prison, recidivism rate is much higher in the United States than in Scandinavian countries. And the reason is in American system, incapacitation, retribution, all this stuff is really important, and nobody cares about rehabilitation in most prisons. And this is a nice diagram to show the goals of punishment. Difference in punishment in the United States, there are felonies, usually involves prison time, and misdemeanors. It's usually a crime which punished by a fine. An important distinction about punishment in democracies, you cannot be punished for something which have been perfectly legal at some point. And I give you an example. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2020, President Putin passed a bunch of laws regarding extremism, terrorism, all those crimes. And at some point, they announced that Anti-Corruption Foundation by Alexei Navalny was extremist terrorist organization. And when it happened, organization obviously disbanded because obviously they didn't want members to be punished by law for being extremists and terrorists. But what Putin government did, they started persecuting a former member of Navalny organization retroactively. In democratic societies, such kind of stuff just doesn't happen. And obvious rights of people who are accused of a crime, like Miranda rights, habeas corpus. If you are in jail, you have the right to be in court and actually know what are the charges. Capital punishment. In the United States, sadly, it still takes place. In my view, government just doesn't have the right to kill somebody. And the reason is, in my view, possibility of judicial mistake. You can look up Innocent Project when you can see some people being freed from prison after spending like many years because of the new evidence, mostly DNA, when technology evolved and they have been able to do additional testing on some evidence. Imagine if some of those people have been killed, then there is nothing you can do. So in my view, capital punishment in terms of death penalty is not acceptable. And as you can see, even in Russia, there is no capital punishment. And these are learning outcomes for discussion for next few moments. Due process, very important aspect. Internationally, it's codified in Declaration of Human Rights. In terms of like general principles, it's British Magna Carta. In America, due process is a constitutional right. And again, it's procedural and substantive, two different aspects of it. One of the first elements of UAT system, there are trial courts, which hear a case for the first time when like some new charges are brought, or in case of civil dispute, like where a case is filed, and then if there is a disagreement, it could go to appellate court. Important aspect in American system, you cannot be tried twice for the same crime, this double jeopardy protection. And this is description of different court levels, trial courts, appellate courts, and highest court in terms of federal system, it's US Supreme Court. But you need to understand that in states, they also have trial courts. Not so sure about appellate courts, but every single state has like a higher court of particular state where they serve like disputes from lower courts and make final decisions. But this only applies to state laws, state violations. And these are basic trial steps in American system. If you watch like a single police procedural drama, you kind of know this stuff. And lastly, and I think this is most interesting topic in this whole discussion, judicial review versus executive sovereignty. And this is what you will learn. Important thing is judicial review allows, in countries which have them, allows courts to serve as a check on executive branch and sometimes on legislative branch of government. So, for instance, in the United States, federal district judges, and then appellate judges, and then Supreme Court judges, all of them have the ability to block any executive action issued by president or his, hopefully her, executive agencies. And Supreme Court, it can say that a particular law passed by Congress is unconstitutional, and it can strike it down. For example, when ACA was passed, a bunch of cases have been filed and brought to Supreme Court, which made small portions of Affordable Care Act unconstitutional. I give you like one example. In Hobby Lobby case, Supreme Court decided that in closely held businesses, whatever that means, employers can deny women contraception coverage. So in the United States, Supreme Court can strike down a particular piece of law or the whole law and decide it's not constitutional. So in some systems, this function of judicial review is really important. And in legislative sovereignty systems, parliament is like most important. For example, in UK, courts in UK, they cannot strike down laws passed by parliament. And I strongly suggest you to look at the academic article I posted in the module for this week. It discusses judicial review systems in different countries. Thank you very much.